Hey everybody, this is Darren Van Dam, and you are watching Flick Connection, the show that helps you get more out of movies. And today I want to tell you about 20 really great movies hiding out on Netflix right now that you have probably missed. So here I am in the still under construction Flick Connection studio. If you're new to the channel, apologies for the disarray, but this is what my studio used to look like. And then this week I gave my Patreon supporters a big preview. We did a whole tour. There's not a whole lot to look at yet, but they got to see kind of what the empty space looks like. So if you are a Patreon supporter and you missed that, go over and check that out. And if you're interested in becoming one, there's a link in the description. This is a ranked list, ranked 20 to 1, 1 being what I think is the absolute best out of all the ones on this list. There are plenty of other great movies on Netflix right now, and odds are I've probably talked about most of them before in previous videos, so be sure to check out the links in the description to some of my more recent uploads. And then about halfway through this list, I'll tell you about the sponsor of this video, CyberGhost VPN. But let's go ahead and kick this one off with a fun movie called The Debt Collector. Now this stars Scott Adkins, and it is a Scott Adkins production. If you're not familiar with him, he is a longtime stuntman, fight choreographer. He's in a ton of movies, but there's this string of movies that he himself is releasing that are lower budget, but they're really good. Some of them are fantastic. I recently talked about Avengement, which is kind of like this crazy Guy Ritchie type thing that's also on Netflix. Well, one that's maybe not as widely accessible is The Debt Collector. Now this one is fun. You just have to keep in mind that it's lower budget, but fight choreography is great. Some of the supporting cast is really surprisingly fantastic for a movie done on this production level. I had a lot of fun with this one. Personally, I would rank it higher on this list. The only reason I did not is because a lot of people are gonna be kind of thrown by the lower budget nature of it, but if you find that you love movies like that, and if you particularly love ones with good fight scenes and stuff like that, The Debt Collector is a lot of fun to watch. Wildling just recently got added to Netflix and is a pretty good movie for horror fans. Now, I'll go ahead and say, don't expect a horror movie, but horror fans should really get into this. It's kind of a gothic thing. There's maybe some supernatural things happening, but it's about a young girl who's raised in these really, really bizarre circumstances. And while it is a coming of age movie, it's hard to put it into that category because it is so weird. Liv Tyler is in it, but it's in no way her movie. It really is the movie of the younger actress working in here. There's some great supporting roles as well, but dark, moody, and just I found the whole thing interesting, particularly for a coming of age story, which are often fairly dull and boring. This one metaphorically sort of stood for a lot, and I was surprised at how well the metaphors actually worked on this one.
We got a dealership in the ICU, 211 cars getting suntans on the lot.
Don, I don't mean to complain, but it's been a year and a half since I've been home, and I'm 90% sure I left my front door open.
Now, if you've been stuck in quarantine and you don't want to watch something dark and moody, The Goods is a really funny comedy that's actually produced by Will Ferrell, and while it does have his brand of humor, it stands out to me among like all of the Will Ferrell movies just because it feels different. This one's actually led off by Jeremy Piven, who I think is a really funny actor. He's obviously done some more dramatic roles and he's done some really great stuff in his career, but this character of this used car salesman really stands out to me. There's some other great comedy actors performing in here. Just a lot of fun, but stupid, like really stupid jokes. If that's something you need in your life right now, I find it to be funny. It is an adult comedy, but I think it's hilarious.
You got a cell phone?
What do I look like? I'm a businessman. People gotta get a hold of me.
All right, let me get your number.
What for?
In case I need to get a hold of you.
Man.
The Ghost Who Walks is another indie flick recently added to Netflix, and I was really surprised by this one. Now, I will say, this is a slow burn, and if you need your movies to sort of pay off in a big way, this is probably not the movie for you. But if you love sort of slow burn little indie gems, this is a great one. And also, if you love sort of retro stuff like 70s movies, deep cut sort of 70s movies. While it's not trying to emulate like a 70s vibe, it just had a lot of characteristics that movies like that would have had, and I loved it. This one's about a guy who gets released from prison. He owes some people some money. They're after him. He's trying to at least get to see his daughter and maybe escape with his baby mama, and it all takes place over one night, and things aren't quite going the way that he thinks that they should unfold, and it's just got kind of this gritty, raw edge. Not only does a lot of it take place in a strip club, there's a third of the movie that takes place where they sort of like run off with a couple of hookers. It's got that sort of an element to it, plus, you know, it opens up in prison, so it's dark and gritty. But if you like the way that I'm describing it, this is your movie. If nothing about what I said interests you, I'm not gonna push you hard into this one.
It's Raiders of the Lost Ark, remade shot for shot by 11-year-old kids in 1982.
That sounds awesome.
Raiders, the story of the greatest fan film ever, is the full title of this documentary about some guys who did a remake of Raiders of the Lost Ark. And they didn't just do a remake with basically no money. As kids, they did a shot for shot, frame for frame remake of Raiders of the Lost Ark as a project, and they got pretty damn close to finishing it when they were kids. And this documentary it chronicles some of that, but it's really about them coming back together as adults and putting, you know, some of their savings into it just to finish it. And it's really cool. This was actually done in an area in Mississippi that I'm from originally, so it meant a little bit more to me with that. But movie lovers, especially if you love Indiana Jones movies, will really get a kick out of this documentary. And I've said this before in relation to another documentary. While documentaries are typically pretty heavy-natured, this one is just light and fun, and while there are some struggles and heavy elements, it really is a nice break, again, from all of the just doom and gloom that's been going on lately. But I love this one, and my true blue movie lovers really should check this one out. All right, so I'm getting a little closer to the camera because a lot of you complained about the audio in the last one. Trust me, I'm in an empty space. There's not a lot I can do about the audio. With the finished studio, I will not have these audio issues. But my next pick is Bloodfather. This one was also recently added, but it's been out for a couple of years. This stars Mel Gibson as this like Hell's Angels kind of a guy. He lives in a trailer park, and Mel Gibson is jacked. He has been hitting the testosterone like a motherfucker lately, but his young estranged daughter comes to him for help, and there's some nasty men after her, and he has to sort of not just fight them off, but he has to figure out how to protect her. There's quite a bit of action in this, although I really hesitate to label it as an action movie. With Mel Gibson having been in some of the greatest action movies of all time, this one does not fit into that category. This is an indie drama flick that does have some action in it to get you through it, but it is compelling. I thought all the performances were really great, but it just had a really cohesive mood to it, and I appreciated the vibe and the setting and all that, and I just thought it all worked together really well. I've been a longtime fan of Mel Gibson, and while his movies are hit and miss lately, this is certainly one of the better ones. Now, Eye for an Eye is a Netflix original, at least here in the US it is, and it is Spanish language, but whoo, man, this one is intense. While I do recommend watching it with subtitles, you can watch it dubbed, and the dubbing's not bad on this one. It's not too distracting like it normally is. But this is about a nurse who gets paired up with a patient who happens to be this really infamous drug kingpin who's sort of like on his way out, and his two sons are sort of squabbling over who's gonna take control of the family, that type of thing, except this nurse has an axe to grind, like a real axe to grind, and he subtly, without anyone noticing, is able to sort of exact revenge slowly and painfully on this old dying drug kingpin. It is dark, dark stuff. This movie gets only darker the longer you watch it. While it is slow paced, man, this one had a payoff. I thought the performances were fantastic in this one for sure, but this one was just different and interesting. Like, I was surprised where it ended up going and the twists and turns that it took. If you love the way I've described this one, do not pass on it. Watch it dubbed if you have to, watch it subbed if you prefer. Just watch it. Unless you're concerned about it being too dark for you, in which case it absolutely is. I'll go ahead and tell you, it's way too dark for you if you're worried that it might be. Christine is a really intense drama, another one that's very dark that you shouldn't watch if you're not in the right mood, but this is a true story about a journalist who actually committed suicide live on the air. Now, while that does give away the end of the movie, That's what the movie's about. That's what it's advertised as being about. And this was a pretty big story, I believe in Sarasota, Florida. She was a newswoman, she was on TV all the time. And the movie's not as much about what ultimately happened, it's more about her breakdown, her mental illness, and sort of this downward spiral that she went through, because that did not get captured on camera. But the movie does a very great job. Very, very strong performances here. This one's heavy, it's intense. There's not much levity to this one at all, but very well done. It's a period piece. It takes place, I believe, in the late 70s, and that's all done very consistently, and it all works together really well. And I just felt like I was watching something somewhat important as it relates to mental illness. So if that's something that interests you, definitely check this one out, but don't just do it willy-nilly. Do it when you're really sort of in a mood to be able to watch something like this, because I'm telling you, this one, while it's not as intense and sort of fanciful as some of the like murder-related stuff that I've talked about, this one feels really real.
Ash, answer the phone!
Hello.
Where's he at? Just hold him off, tell him I'm coming.
He's on the bicycle.
No, dummy, is wait. What wait's he at?
Where you at, Vinny?
I'm coming!
He's coming.
Now, another one based on a true story that I loved is called Bleed for This. In this one, Miles Teller plays a famous boxer who was almost killed in a car accident and was almost paralyzed and just somehow managed to come back to fighting rather quickly. This one is going to make you cringe. There are some scenes of him with the full neck brace, with the screws, the whole Halo rig, doing bench presses in his basement, trying to be quiet so no one finds out. It's gnarly stuff, and apparently it's all true. I thought Miles Teller did a good job. I love sort of the 80s vibe that this movie had as well. And it's just a good boxing movie. There's so many good boxing movies because boxing is just this raw metaphor for competition. It's so simple and it's so cinematic, and it just makes for great storytelling. And while Bleed for This isn't, the next Rocky or anything, it is very good and very enjoyable, and I think a lot of you will really dig it. The last one on my bottom 10 is Code 8. This is one of the more recent sci-fi movies for Netflix to add. This is a small indie flick that comes from Canada. I'm not gonna highlight the small nature of this movie too much because they killed it with the special effects in this one. They made some very smart choices. There's basically these androids that are walking around at this police force, but they're just people in costumes, but the costuming worked really well where they didn't have to spend all this money on all this CGI. But there's also people with like powers, so if you like the show Heroes, you're gonna really dig this one. There's a lot of elements going on in this one. Earlier in the list, I mentioned Wildling. That one had a lot in common with Freaks, which is another movie on Netflix right now that I've talked about recently. This one also has a lot in common with it as well, but in a totally different way. It's almost as if Code 8 and Wildling had a baby and made Freaks. That's the best way I can put it, but I was surprised at how much I liked Code 8. If you want to watch something sci-fi related that's just new, I'm not going to say different because it has a lot in common with a lot of things you've seen before, but just something sort of new and fresh. Code 8 is very successful in that category. All right, so it's time for the sponsor, and CyberGhost VPN has been a sponsor for months now, and I'm continuing to promote them because people continue to sign up and I continue to get positive feedback. Now, like all VPN services, CyberGhost protects your web browsing. It makes it private, it makes it secure. They all do that to one degree or another. However, the best ones, like CyberGhost, don't use any logs, they don't sell any of your data, while a lot of the free ones do. In addition to that, CyberGhost is different because it allows you to access Netflix and other streaming services like Prime Video and Hulu using their specialized servers, and you can see what's on in other countries. I don't just mean you can see what other people are watching. You can watch all the movies that Netflix offers in the UK and Australia and Germany. And likewise, if you're in another country and you're watching this full list of 20 and you want to know why you can't watch them, it has to do with licensing issues, but CyberGhost will allow you to watch everything I'm talking about because they have servers optimized for the US Netflix as well. They have an outstanding 45-day money-back guarantee, so there's virtually no risk. They have great 24/7 customer support. You can use it on up to 7 devices simultaneously, and it's devices that you have like Mac, Android, Linux, Fire Stick, Chrome, and more. And right now you can get it for as little as $2.75 a month. That's less than $3 a month to access all the movies available on Netflix in multiple countries. To get that deal, just use my link in the description of this video. It's also in the top comment on this video, which includes the full list of all the movies listed in this video as well. But please follow the link, check it out, see if it's for you, and if you do end up using it, please let me know what you think about it.
Watch.
No, please don't do that. They're only children.
All right, The Girl with All the Gifts is one that I talked about very, very briefly in my Everything Coming to Netflix in April video. There's a link to that in the description. But this is a zombie movie based on a book by the same name. And while I didn't read the book, Mrs. Van Dam did, and she told me this was a pretty faithful adaptation of the book. Obviously, it's a lot less than the book, which is always the case, but I felt like this one was very different. While the zombie territory has been really well worn, there's a lot of people doing the same stuff over and over again. There's elements of that in here because it is zombies, but there is a lot of new, fresh ideas in this one, which I totally appreciate. In addition to it just being a good story with good performances and good production value, the most I got out of it though was the fact that there was something new in the zombie territory. While the movie does feel somewhat familiar as it relates to zombies, it's also just, it's more different than anything I've probably seen since 28 Days Later. It's that fresh. While I don't think it's as good as that movie, it's kind of that different and fresh. And it is damn good. I mean, I got it in my top 10.
All of us are connected, and we'll all share in our fate.
I have to find her.
Now, Song of the Sea kind of stands out on this list because I've got a lot of kind of dark, heavy stuff. I know I mentioned a comedy. I've got another documentary on the list. This is a real mixed bag, but Song of the Sea is this beautifully animated movie. It's got this Irish mysticism. There's really wild characters in this one, and it is just an amazing story. This is a fantastic one to watch with slightly older kids. It's gonna be over your kid's head to a certain degree, but not only is the animation beautiful, the story is really incredible, and it's really complex too. While I think your kids will enjoy watching it, you're gonna like it more than they do probably, and with everything being CGI nowadays, but it'd be great to show your kids something new and fresh that is hand-drawn, and I think it's worth pointing out to them that it's animated that way, and that's different than what they're normally seeing. And to me, I don't know, it's just a little more special.
It's heavier than I thought it'd be. Oh, you think Stalin's too heavy? No, it's a compliment. Gold is heavy.
Well, you know, you've looted enough of it, you saucy little pirate.
Get back in the dining room. Right, guess what? This way.
Stop using his feet.
I'm sorry.
So another comedy on the list is The Death of Stalin. This is a satire, actually based on a graphic novel, though you wouldn't know that by watching it. It has that vibe nowhere in it. This really plays out more like a stage play. It's got some amazing actors in it, like Steve Buscemi and others. And this is literally about Stalin dying and then just the political chaos that ensues afterwards. It's very, very dry, but hilarious. And if you know anything about history, this is a very, very interesting watch. While I did think it was really funny, I actually had trouble laughing during this one because so much of it is so true. It's kind of upsetting, but the movie does a great job at keeping it sort of light and funny while still showing you some of the horrors that regime unleashed upon the world. I thought the movie was incredibly balanced in that respect. Speaking of horror, the Amityville Horror. I know some of you are immediately going, wait, that's not a hidden gem. The original is not. The remake with Ryan Reynolds and all 9 of his abs is a hidden gem. This one got severely overlooked, and I think it's because it came out at a time when there were a lot of these horror remakes of classic horror movies, and a lot of them are not good. The Amityville Horror is surprisingly good. It's dark, it's moody, Ryan Reynolds' performance is fantastic. There's a scene where he's chopping wood that is super intense, and it also features all 9 of his abs. But this one just got really dark, and it is scary. It's surprisingly effective for one of these sort of just remakes that were all became throwaways. This one really stands out, and I think it's severely underrated.
The fact is, a place like this forces us to become warriors or victims.
The only thing that matters is you getting home to your family in one piece.
Shot Caller is one that I've been talking about for years because it's been on Amazon Prime for a long time. It's only been on Netflix for a few months, but this one's fantastic. This one's about kind of a regular guy who goes to prison, and the prison system turns him into, I don't want to say an animal, but turns him into a beast. And you get to see this entire character arc over the whole movie. This one's got a really great cast. And just as far as recent releases for prison movies, this one stands out as one that's pretty great. I have recommended it before, and I've got nothing but positive feedback in the comments about this movie. So if you still haven't watched it, definitely check it out.
What is that, blood in there? Yeah. It's gonna be extra.
A really fun sort of neo-noir crime flick starring one of my favorite actors, John Hawkes, is Small Town Crime. Now, do not confuse this one with a Netflix original movie called Small Crimes. Totally different movie. While I did like that one, Small Town Crime is way better. Not only is Hawkes fantastic in this one, it's a good story. If you liked Wind River, which was on Netflix and very popular, and another one that I got a lot of positive feedback on this channel from recommending, if you liked that one, this one's not as dark, but it's similar in a lot of ways and just as enjoyable in my opinion. While probably not as good because the production value is not as high, like they didn't spend as much money on this one, I think they did a fantastic job. It's really well directed. But if you like good mystery movies, this one's just fantastic. But keep in mind, this one's pretty high up on the list, so if you generally like my recommendations, don't sleep on this one. Now, while I pushed Small Town Crime pretty hard, because I think it's really widely accessible and I think most of you watching this video will really enjoy it, The Killing of a Sacred Deer is not such a movie. This one is for a small sliver of society that like their movies, super weird and super fucked up. This is a dark, twisted movie. It's done by the same director as The Lobster, which I actually liked more just because it was a little zanier and crazier. If you liked The Lobster, be warned that Sacred Deer is way darker than The Lobster, and The Lobster was dark. This one's gonna get you in your bones, but it's so interesting and it's just weird and it works somehow. Like if you just read the synopsis on paper, you'd be like, that's not gonna work. What, Colin Farrell's in that? He kills it. The whole cast kills it. It all works together, but I'm telling you, this one, I'm getting like my spine's kind of tingling just thinking about this one. I know I'm selling it really hard, but I am warning you. If you don't like weirder movies that sort of leave you with your mouth open at the end, if that feels like a waste of your time, don't mess around with this movie. But if you're excited by the way I'm talking about it, make it the first one you watch off of this list. Sort of on a similar note, it's got a similar vibe, but it's way more accessible, is another foreign language Netflix original movie. The dubbing on this one is not bad as well. It's called The Occupant. Now this is about sort of a high-powered marketing executive who loses his job, ends up losing his house, and then sort of wedges himself into the lives of the family that moved into his dream home. That's all I'll tell you, other than this one also just takes these really dark twists and turns. I thought this one was just really clever and it felt very different. I didn't feel like I was watching a rehash of something I'd maybe seen before. This just felt completely different. It was directed very cleanly, it's smooth, there's not a lot of bumps and wrinkles in this one. It just all works together, and like I said, the dubbing's not bad. If you just can't bring yourself to read subtitles, you can watch it like that. And it's a story you're not going to get anywhere else until they, eventually remake it for an American audience, which they will likely do because it is that good. All right, with only 2 left, my number 2 pick is a documentary, which is rare. I literally couldn't put it anywhere else. This is where it belongs. Senna is a fantastic documentary about one of the most famous Formula One racers in history, one of. and it is a very complex story about the politics of racing. I know that sounds boring to a lot of you, but trust me, this one is as enthralling as any movie. If you loved Ford versus Ferrari, this is a great companion piece. It has a lot of similar themes, and the documentary is really well put together. I was stunned at how much I enjoyed this one. Not just because it's a good documentary, but it was just so engrossing. Like, I was glued to my seat. It was just this incredibly compelling story about people constantly trying to screw him over and cheat him out of wins and stuff. Just really great stuff. I cannot sell this one enough. Watch this one, put it on your list. Make sure to watch it before it leaves, because it's been on there a few months and it's not the type of movie that I expect Netflix to keep for long.
Who'd you kill?
Oh, just a bad piece of business. I don't need to hear about it.
I need to hear about it.
Now, my number one pick is one of my favorite movies currently on Netflix. It's Mud, starring Matthew McConaughey. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have seen it by now because I've talked about this movie quite a few times, but anyone that's coming to this channel fresh, there's a good chance they haven't seen this. I love this one. I love the director. I love Matthew McConaughey in it. The kids that are in this one do a fantastic job, including Ty Sheridan, who has now grown up and gone on to do things like Ready Player One. This one reminds me of playing in the woods when I was a kid, and then it's got this crime element, and there's a shootout, and it just has all the things that I think a good movie should have, except for boobs and some sex. But I can look past that because everything else is so good. Reese Witherspoon has a little role in it that really is against her type, that plays out so well. And it's just a really fantastic story. If you've never seen it, this is a highly, highly recommended movie from Darren Van Dam. But that is it for this list. Like I said, if you're new here and you like content like this, be sure to click that subscribe button. In fact, just go do it right now and click that little bell icon so you get notified when I put out new videos like this, which I do once or twice a week, so I make sure you never run out of good movies to watch. And while you're letting me know what you plan on watching in the comments below, be sure to thank the Patreon supporters as well. Here is everyone currently donating $5 and up a month. There are $1 and $3 tiers, so be sure to go over to the Patreon link. It's in the description, and see if you would like to be a part of it as we grow this thing, because it is growing. Again, sorry if there's audio issues, but I'm in this huge space that we're building out. It's gonna be a lot of fun. There's gonna be a lot of new stuff coming at you, so stay tuned. But I will keep making videos like this one as long as you keep watching them. Thanks for watching this episode, and you will see me on the next one.